Hi, I'm James Markley, the Business Development Manager for Data Tech here in Tampa, Florida. I'm joined by
Monterey Schatzberg. I'm one of the managed services engineers for Data Tech as well.
one of the things we're coming with you to talk about today is the Windows 7 end of life, the Windows Server 2008 end of life, and the Microsoft Exchange Server 2010 end of life. I told Todd and Andre before we started this broadcast, I'm like, this could go really bad or really good. I'm hoping it goes really good. We're going to find out. It's really our first one we're doing this. So please, by all means, leave comments and let us know how we're doing. So one of the things that I gathered as a fact before we got into this was that Windows 10 just surpassed Windows 7 in terms of total installs in the world in November of 2018. If you think about how long Windows 10 has been out, that's really kind of a concern. The other part of that, though, is that Windows 7 still accounts for 40% of the total market share throughout the world. So one of the things that we brought Andre in to talk about today and to kind of have a back and forth discussion with is what are we really looking at in terms of security updates, patches, service packs, things that people are going to experience on the client side if they don't actually upgrade their machines. So Andre, I know we were talking just before we got on this about the podcast that you listen to. So why don't you tell us a little bit about some of the things that you know, just based on your personal knowledge and based on your professional knowledge, in terms of what customers can expect.
So yeah, the podcast that I listen to on a weekly basis called Security Now with Steve Gibson and Leo Laporte, and they go over an array and a myriad of security issues that are facing us in the tech world,
right?
Especially when it comes to business security.
Okay.
And of course, the deprecation of operating systems and software that's going on, especially with more recent issues we've seen with Windows XP Server 2003,
okay.
Has been a major concern. And we saw it 2 years ago with ransomware WannaCry that went around. So many 2003 servers and XP machines were still out there being used. Very old, deprecated software that was easily to exploit, that could have been upgraded, could have been moved to a more secure platform years prior to, but wasn't.
Right.
And because of that, it left so many companies completely wide open. Aside from that, we also have things like recently we found out with a lot of our Intel and AMD processors that they have flaws in themselves that we are just now finding that have been there for years that we wouldn't really have expected to have been an issue. And now
I know one of those that came up was just last month, the Spectre variant 2.
Right.
That was a patch that was just issued for Windows 7, and then I think what was it, Meltdown?
Yes.
So
Spectre Meltdown.
Right. And then I've noticed too, some of the software packages out there for the endpoint protection and even like central server protection aren't supporting older operating systems too. So would you expect that those types of software packages will work on older operating systems as people move forward and Windows stops supporting that, do you think? Or
No. So a lot of the different things from AV to backup software to even what we use in terms of management software for endpoints, a lot of it is not going to work on older operating systems. Already, if you have a Windows XP system or a Server 2003 system, we're not going to be able to take backups of certain software. We're not going to be able to run certain AV on it because it's not supported. And we're not even going to be able to manage it with our management software because it's unsupported.
Right.
And that is going to continue the way that it goes. As those softwares develop and continue to stay around, eventually they're going to start phasing out deprecated operating systems. Windows 7 and Server 2008 are going to go right along the way with Windows XP in 2003.
Right. Now, one of the things that, I think a lot of our customers and even some of the people in the world right now are struggling with is, do you take a computer that had Windows 7 on it? Let's say you bought it, for no pun intended, 7 years ago. Do you take that computer now and upgrade to Windows 10? Is it worth the $200 investment to upgrade that licensing for the retail version? Or is that something that you really kind of look at it from a hardware perspective, do you think, and say, hey, it's a 7-year-old computer?
Really, it does depend on when it was purchased. If you bought a Windows 7 machine, it's 10 years old, and you're thinking about potentially upgrading it to Windows 10, it's not going to be worth it.
Right.
Your hardware may not be supported by Windows 10, so you might not even be able to upgrade it. As well as the fact of the matter that 10-year-old aged hardware, you're going to start noticing issues such as a hard drive going, memory going bad. Maybe your CPU is just too slow.
Right.
You're better off going for something brand new with the operating system, as well as having things like warranty support, and of course with Windows 10, the continued security update support.
Now, I know one of the things, and I experienced this personally. I had a USB device that I plugged into a Windows 10 machine. That changed drastically between Windows 7 and Windows 10 was the way they do some of the driver signing. Is that right? Like you now have to do a whole kind of hack just to basically get unsigned drivers supported in Windows 10. Is that correct?
Right. A lot of the security movement that's going, or I'm sorry, a lot of the security that's being moved into is making sure that things are valid, making sure that things can be verified.
Okay.
So just as we see it with websites, just as we see it with entire networks that there has to be secure validation, you're going to see it with your own personal little pieces of USB drives or USB mass media storage. You're going to see the same thing. There has to be some form of validation that the operating system knows this is a legitimate piece of hardware that I can work with and I can actually trust.
I can actually see that being a benefit. I actually had somebody who reached out to me. They weren't one of our clients yet, but they had an issue with endpoint security, and they had a device that had an improperly signed driver. They had to do an override to get that driver to work on Windows 10, and then lo and behold, found out it was actually a payload injector to get bad and nefarious files onto their network.
Oh yeah,
so
yeah, and
this is security side. That's huge.
Yeah, this is something that we've seen before. There are people that have no problem leaving, say, a USB thumb drive at a gas station or just dropping it at a mall just to see if anybody will pick it up. And what it has on it is a malware package that's prepared to install as soon as it meets the system.
Right.
And of course, it's going to be designed where the Windows 10 system probably isn't going to trust it, but it's also going to be something that's going to be kind of silent. So you plug it in, everything looks fine. Maybe it works. Maybe you have to get it to work. But in the background, what it's doing is it's dropping its payload. It's opening connections directly to wherever they need to connect to in order to do sniffing of any of the information, even basic key logging, just getting passwords, credit card numbers, anything like that. We've heard it before, people that will just randomly find a USB drive and plug it into your system. It's one of the worst things you can possibly do. That's the equivalent of going out there and finding a place completely filled with people that had influenza and just standing in the middle of it.
Right.
So yeah, these sorts of things are definitely going to happen.
Right. Well, we talked about yesterday. It was funny. I was actually talking with our VP of our company here. He said it's kind of like having a tube of toothpaste. Once somebody gets in your system, you pour all the toothpaste out. You're not going to be able to get it back.
Oh yeah, yeah. Good luck.
It's a good analogy overall. But one of the things that kind of as you mentioned that we were talking about Windows 7 and Windows 10 versus patches and updates, and we talked a little bit about Spectre and Meltdown. I can't imagine that if Windows 7 stops getting patch updates in January 14th of 2020 next year, that they're going to be able to respond to these zero-day threats, the kind of things that people may be putting on payload injectors like USB devices or things, especially with the endpoint security side of it, knowing that, if you think about all the antivirus products and things that aren't going to be supported in this next OS, the previous OS, Windows 7, that's going to be a mess. I mean, really, if you're not on the forefront of it right now in terms of identifying the hardware you need to upgrade. Wouldn't you think so?
Oh yeah, definitely. And think about when we got Windows XP. Windows XP was touted as the most secure operating system. We even saw a specific person working for Microsoft get up on stage and said, "This is the most secure operating system." Fast forward to 2 years ago, and all of a sudden, what was once the most secure operating system is existing in a world with extremely well put together malware, very sophisticated tools and techniques for being able to do intrusion, being able to do lockdown and takeover of systems, being able to encrypt everything. So what was once the most secure system is now living in a world that has far surpassed what it was, and it now leaves it completely wide open to things. And if you're not prepared to make that move, to be able to let your business grow into better fields of technology with that more stable and dependable security, you're going to wind up being a victim of something that somebody develops tomorrow that, no, we don't have a way to stop. And Microsoft may not necessarily be prepared for that, so they're going to have to do exactly what they did before, scramble to put together an emergency patch in order to target how did these people get in, let's go ahead and shut these doors and make sure this can't happen to this degree again. Because even now, there's still a very, very small percentage of Windows XP machines out there that could easily be targeted. And Windows 7 machines were just as easily targeted by that ransomware. And they're, of course, out there. As you said, the numbers show that it's still 40% of the market share. So that's still 40% of consumers that could be hit by tomorrow's next big malware attack that's specifically designed to take down Windows 7 and Server 2008 machines.
One of the things that I think there's a misconception in is that the reason that operating systems keep coming out and the reason that hardware manufacturers keep coming out with new hardware really is this drive to keep selling. But I think the realization is that between Windows 7 and Windows 10, the platform in terms of the underlying kernel and everything's changed so much in terms of security. And people, there's a misconception understanding that kernel change has been so critical in terms of securing infrastructure and securing the world. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure between Windows 7 and Windows 10, they actually completely rewrote the entire kernel. Is that right?
They did.
Okay.
They did. Yeah. They started from the ground to build something that was going to be next generation that they could support for years and years to come. And we've seen that with the feature updates. Instead of having Windows 11 or Windows 12, we're now getting these feature updates that add newer concepts, newer ways of doing things, as well as bolstering the security and stability of Windows 10. We think back to when Windows 10 originally came out, and we saw this with Windows 7 going from XP to Windows 7. It's very hard to be forced to change how your operating system works, how it feels, but at the same time, you do have to accept that what you're using, at some point in time, it's going to be too old. It's going to be insecure. But now we go back to currently. Windows 10 has gotten a lot better, a lot more sophisticated. There are some really neat tools that come with it. And definitely on the security side of things, there are some great features that really help to give you more control over making sure that your stuff is protected. For instance, I've actually heard a lot of really great things just about Windows Defender itself. Now, back in the day when you had XP and you had 2007 and they were sideloading Windows Defender, it was worthless. You were better off just taking your computer and plugging it to the public internet and saying, go right ahead, do whatever you want. But Windows Defender has actually gotten a lot more secure, a lot more solid, and there's a lot more that you can do with it, even sandboxing Windows Defender itself to make it even more protected.
Right. Now, on Windows Defender, do you, really, if you kind of look at it from a security perspective, I don't think we knock anything that Microsoft does because really they're trying to make a more secure operating system infrastructure.
Right.
Do you think that is kind of the end-all, be-all in terms of security, or is there another layer that really has to be added, on the software side?
I would not say that there does not need to be another layer added to it. I think extra security is definitely worth it. You just kind of have to be a little careful on what you're putting on things. You start running into conflicts between antivirus or conflicts between malware scanners. And you also have to be aware that you can add as much security as you want, but eventually you're going to add too much, and it's actually going to be more of a problem.
Right.
Anything.
I think one of the
too much
things
of
you
anything.
mentioned, one of the things you just mentioned was actually he mentioned, you can add as much security as you want, but you still have to be careful because really at the end of the day, right, we can be as secure as we want, but that's also going to kind of lead into whether or not, there's always somebody that's one step ahead, I guess you could say, right?
Right.
So really at that point, it becomes a matter of not just the security side of it, right? You can be 99% secure, let's say. Let's say, just as an example, Windows 7 is 25% secure, 50% secure. Windows 10 brings you up to, say, 80 or 90% secure. I still think that's a 10% element,
Oh, yeah. Well, that's the reason why some of us have jobs working in the security field. There's always somebody out there that's trying to find the new way to get into a system, the new way to be able to crypto lock things. You have to stay ahead of that. You have to know what's coming out and how you can build your network, your system, your infrastructure to be able to prevent as much of that as possible. And even if you can't prevent everything, that means you have to be there on the front line, prepared to handle what you couldn't prevent, or just to be there to be prepared to change things so that you can handle what's coming around.
The only other thing I wanted to kind of allude to is that I also think that we have, as we talk a little about security updates, we talk a little about driver updates and things of that nature. I think what we had Microsoft Exchange Server 2010 just got that last service pack a couple years ago. We're really going to kind of run into this situation where we aren't going to have any more service packs, kind of end of life. What's done is done. If you could leave our customers or our people watching Facebook with one piece of advice in terms of upgrading, what would you leave them with?
Honestly, I think it's say know what's coming. Know what's coming down the line. Do your research. Really kind of branch out and understand what different companies are doing. Learn what's going to be coming within the next, I'd say, 5 to 10 years so that you can plan out to be ahead of the game when it starts happening.
I think that's the biggest thing that we see with our clients. And I think we do a pretty good job about being able to go in and kind of technology roadmap that and kind of plan it for them and work with them a little bit to say, hey, we need to plan out 3 years in advance or 5 years in advance for these infrastructure upgrades that have to happen. Right now, really getting with our clients and working with them on their PC upgrades because that's important. It's a large investment to talk about buying a $200 Windows license, especially on a machine that may only be worth $150 on the street. right now because it's so old. So getting to that point where you don't have to worry about that. But the one last thing I'll leave is, Andre mentioned a very important topic as we were talking about security, was really kind of that other 10%. How do you fill that gap, another 10%? And so I look forward to next week. Next week we'll be discussing how to fill that other 10%, and it may be backup and disaster recovery, which is how do you actually recover from an issue like that, because you can't protect yourself against things like CryptoLocker, not when it initially comes out as a zero-day threat. So, I definitely looking forward to next week when we talk about how do you recover from that. So, anyways, thanks for joining us, Andre.
Yeah, thank you very much, guys. Been
All
great.
right, and leave us a like, comment, or share. All right, have a good day.